"Get out of my house, you insane woman!" The venomous shout from Jake reverberates in my ears as I sit forlornly on the curb, my heartache manifesting in the relentless stream of tears cascading down my cheeks. The memory of his cruel hands shoving me to the unforgiving floor still lingers painfully, alongside the icy disdain in his eyes as he discarded me like refuse. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell to avoid missing any videos. This is how my 57th birthday has unfolded, my flesh and blood. My son treating me as though I am insignificant, as though all the years I devoted to loving him, nurturing him, and making countless sacrifices mean nothing. And now, all because of that wretched woman he chose to marry, he can't even bear the sight of me. Amber, even the mere mention of her name ignites a fury within me. From the very moment Jake introduced her into our lives, I sensed the storm she would bring. Her gaze was filled with disdain, as though I was merely an obstacle to be removed. She subtly poisoned his mind, whispering poisonous lies into his ear and gradually turning him against me. I pleaded with him to see through her deceit, to recognize her manipulative schemes, but he was blind, intoxicated by the illusion of her unconditional love. Hey, the only thing she truly adores is herself. And now, because of her, I've been stripped of everything: my son, my beloved grandchildren, the very family I've devoted my life to, discarded like yesterday's refuse. As I wallow in my misery, a car approaches and halts beside me. The window slides down, revealing the concerned face of my dearest friend, Maggie. "Oh my God, what happened? Why are you out here?" Her voice is thick with worry and disbelief. I can barely manage to croak out the painful truth. Jake. He threw me out, called me crazy, and claimed it was his house. Now Maggie's eyes widen in shock, quickly transforming into a glare of righteous indignation. "He did what? On your birthday? Oh, sweetie, get in the car. You're coming home with me." I slide into the passenger seat, my entire body feeling numb as Maggie drives us away. She keeps darting glances at me, her forehead creased with concern. "This is unacceptable, Diane. Jake can't treat you like this. Something has to be done," she insists, her voice firm. I can only shake my head in resignation. "What can I do, Mags? He's a grown man. He's made his choice." Maggie's lips tighten, her eyes flashing with a steely resolve. "Maybe so, but that doesn't mean he gets to escape the consequences. You're his mother, for heaven's sake." It's high time Jake and that wicked woman of his learned that their actions have repercussions. I turn towards her, confusion clouding my expression. "What are you suggesting?" A slow, knowing smile spreads across Maggie's face. "I'm saying, my dear, that it's time for a bit of payback, and I know exactly who can help us get it." As the car speeds into the encroaching night, a faint spark of something I haven't felt in a long time, hope flickers within me. Perhaps, just perhaps, I might find a way to make Jake and Amber face the consequences of their cruelty, so that maybe, at long last, karma will catch up with them. The day had begun with a semblance of normalcy. It was my birthday, and despite the heartache caused by Jake, I was resolved to make the best of it. I spent the morning sprucing up the house, hanging up a few cheerful decorations, and preparing a special dinner. I even picked up a cake from the bakery down the street, the very place Jake had always loved as a child. Around noon, I gathered my courage and called Jake, my heart a tumult of hope and anxiety. To my surprise, he answered. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" His voice was flat, cautious. I took a steadying breath. "Well, I was wondering if you, Amber, and the kids might like to come over for dinner tonight. It's my birthday, and I thought it would be nice to have some family time." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could hear muffled voices, as though he was conferring with someone. Finally, he responded, "Yeah, okay, we can do that. What time?" Relief flooded through me as Jake agreed to come over. "How about 6 p.m.? I'm making your favorite lasagna," I suggested, trying to sound upbeat. "Sure, "See you then," he replied curtly before hanging up abruptly. The rest of the day blurred together in a whirlwind of frantic preparation and hopeful anticipation. By 6 p.m., everything was in place. The lasagna was bubbling enticingly in the oven, the table was beautifully set, and the cake sat proudly on the counter, a testament to my effort. The doorbell rang precisely on time, and I hurried to answer it, a broad smile lighting up my face. But as soon as I opened the door, my heart plummeted. Jake stood there with a grimace etched deeply into his features. Next to him was Amber, her expression a perfect mask of disdain. The children were conspicuously absent. "Where are the kids?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice from trembling. Amber's laugh was sharp and cutting. "We decided it would be best if they stayed away. We wouldn't want them exposed to any more of your toxic influence." Her words felt like a physical blow. "Toxic influence? What on earth are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice quivering. Amber advanced, jabbing an accusatory finger at me. "Don't act clueless, Diane. We all know what kind of mother you were, the way you manipulated Jake, turning him against his father with your guilt trips and deceit. It's no wonder he wants nothing to do with you." Tears welled up in my eyes. I turned to Jake, silently begging him to speak up in my defense, but he stood there, arms crossed and silent. "That's not true," I managed to say through my tears. "I have always loved and supported Jake. I would never intentionally hurt him." Amber's eyes gleamed with vindictive satisfaction. "Stop the martyr routine. You're just a bitter, self-centered woman who can't accept that Jake has moved on and chosen me over you." My resolve shattered. A surge of anger took over, and before I could stop myself, I lunged toward Amber, intent on smearing that smug smirk off her face. But Jake intervened, his hand clamping down painfully on my wrist. "Don't you dare touch my wife," he snarled. "You're pathetic, you know that? This whole birthday charade you've concocted won't change anything. We're done with you." With a final, crushing shove, Jake sent me stumbling backward. I barely managed to catch myself on the door frame, my tears flowing freely now, a relentless cascade down my cheeks. "Jake, please," I whispered desperately. "I'm your mother," but his response was a chilling shake of his head, his eyes as cold as ice. "Not anymore. Come on, Amber, let's go." I watched in helpless agony as they turned their backs on me, walking away with the decisive slam of the door echoing through the empty house, sealing my fate with brutal finality. And there I remained, alone on my birthday, my heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. Time seemed to stretch and blur as I stood frozen, unable to grasp the full weight of Jake and Amber's cruelty. Minutes, hours, it all melded into a haze of pain and disbelief. The ache in my chest was an unbearable void, a deep, gnawing despair that felt like it might consume me whole. Eventually, I mustered the strength to close the door, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I stumbled to the couch and collapsed onto the cushions, my body convulsing with uncontrollable sobs. How could he do this to me? My son, treating me as though I were insignificant, as though all the years I spent loving and caring for him meant nothing. The sound of my phone ringing cut through the fog of my despair. I looked at the screen, seeing Maggie's name flashing there. For a brief moment I considered ignoring it, not wanting to add to her burdens with my misery. But the thought of facing this anguish alone was unbearable. With a shaky breath, I answered the call, my voice cracking with tears. "Hello." "Diane, what's wrong? Did something happen with Jake?" The concern in Maggie's voice was like a crack in a dam, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I broke down completely, the entire heartbreaking saga spilling out in a torrent of gasps and sobs. Maggie listened with unwavering patience, her soothing words a balm to my wounded soul. "That's it," she said with resolve once I had finished recounting the ordeal. "This has gone too far. Jake and Amber can't keep treating you like this. It's time they face some real consequences." I wiped my tear-streaked face, struggling to pull myself together. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice still trembling. Maggie's voice took on a determined edge. "I mean, it's time for a little payback. They think they can trample all over you without any repercussions, but they've got another thing coming. You're a strong woman, Diane. It's time to start acting like it." Her words ignited a spark within me, a flicker of defiant anger amid the pain. She was right. I couldn't simply sit and wallow in my misery. I needed to reclaim my strength and take control of the situation. "Okay," I said, my voice gaining firmness. "What do you have in mind?" I could almost hear Maggie's grin through the phone. "Meet me at the diner in an hour. I've got someone you need to meet. Trust me, he's going to be a big help." An hour later, I found myself in a booth at the local diner, facing Maggie, who was perched with a mischievous twinkle in her eye as she sipped her coffee. "So, who is this mysterious person?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Just then, the bell above the door jingled, and Maggie's eyes brightened. She waved enthusiastically at someone behind me. "There he is now." I turned around, my eyes widening as a tall, broad-shouldered man approached our table. His rugged appearance and the no-nonsense demeanor he carried spoke volumes of a life lived through its fair share of hardships. "Diane, this is my brother Carlos," Maggie introduced, gesturing for him to take a seat. Carlos gave me a nod, his sharp gaze scrutinizing me with a hint of empathy. Maggie filled me in on what's been happening. "I'm sorry about what Jake and his wife did. That's a tough break." I shrugged, attempting to mask my turmoil with a semblance of indifference. "It is what it is," I said, though the pain coiling in my gut belied my casual tone. Carlos leaned forward, his expression intensifying. "No, Diane, it isn't. And it won't be if I have anything to say about it. I'm a private investigator, and I believe we can devise a plan to teach Jake and Amber a lesson they won't forget." His confident assertion kindled a spark of hope within me. Perhaps, just maybe, things could change for the better. The idea of justice, of retribution, was a balm to my wounded spirit. The scene with Jake replayed in my mind. The sting of his words echoed painfully. "You made that choice for me the moment you decided to pull this stunt. I'm done with you, Mom. Done with your lies, your schemes, all of it." As he turned to leave, a wave of panic engulfed me. I couldn't bear to lose him like this. "Jake, please," I cried out, but he was already storming away, slamming the door behind him with a finality that shattered my already fractured heart. I collapsed onto the floor, my sobs erupting uncontrollably. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. The truth was meant to be liberating, to bridge the chasm between us, but instead, it had driven him further away. Through my tears, the relentless ringing of my phone cut through the haze of my despair. It was Carlos calling. I answered with a voice choked with emotion. "Diane, what happened? Did it work?" My response was a bitter, hollow laugh that seemed to come from a place of deep, aching sadness. "No, it didn't work. Jake's gone. He chose Amber." There was a tense pause on the other end, and I could almost hear Carlos's mind racing. Then his voice, steady and determined, cut through the silence. "Then we move on to Plan B. We need to go to the police and get them to reopen the investigation into Amber's ex's death." I shook my head in defeat, even though he couldn't see me. What's the point? It won't change anything. Jake made his choice. Carlos's voice grew firmer, carrying a weight of unwavering resolve. "Diane, this isn't just about Jake anymore. This is about seeking justice. We need to ensure that Amber pays for the deceit and harm she's caused, no matter how difficult the path." I closed my eyes, feeling the crushing burden of exhaustion and grief. The thought of pursuing such a drastic course of action against my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren, was overwhelming. Yet the memory of Jake's disdainful gaze, the venom in his voice, and Amber's self-satisfied smirk ignited a fierce determination within me. They had brought this upon themselves, and now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. "Okay," I whispered, my voice gaining strength. "Let's do it. Let's make her pay." The days that followed were a whirlwind of relentless activity and emotional turmoil. Carlos and I plunged into organizing the mountains of evidence he had painstakingly gathered. We meticulously compiled it into a well-organized package, preparing to present it to the authorities. The process was grueling. Every document and every photograph was scrutinized and cataloged with meticulous care. Maggie remained a constant source of support, her encouragement a vital lifeline whenever my resolve wavered. Her presence was a reminder that I was not alone in this fight. Finally, the pivotal day arrived. We walked into the police station, our spirits buoyed by a sense of purpose and resolve. Our heads were held high as we navigated the sterile, intimidating environment of the precinct, prepared to expose the dark truths hidden in Amber's past. We approached the front desk and requested to speak with a detective, our hearts pounding with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. When we were finally ushered into the detective's office, we faced a man whose demeanor was as professional as it was unyielding. He listened attentively as we laid out our case, our voices steady despite the emotional weight of our words. Carlos presented the documents and photographs with precision, each piece of evidence meticulously detailed. The detective's brow furrowed deeply as he examined the materials, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he pieced together the disturbing narrative. Throughout the meeting, I could feel the tension in the room, a palpable sense of expectation hanging in the air. The detective asked probing questions, seeking clarity and additional details. Carlos and I answered as best as we could, our responses punctuated by the urgency of our mission. As the detective absorbed the gravity of the situation, I clung to a fragile thread of hope that our efforts might lead to some form of justice. The detective promised to review the evidence thoroughly and indicated that he would consider reopening the investigation. As we left the police station, the weight of our task did not lift, but a sense of cautious optimism began to take its place. We had taken the first step toward holding Amber accountable, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, justice might be within reach. When we finished our meeting, the detective leaned back in his chair, a grim expression settling on his face. He studied the file intently, the weight of the situation apparent in his demeanor. "This is serious stuff," he said, his voice low and measured as he tapped the file. "If what you're saying is accurate, we have substantial grounds to reopen the investigation into Miss Wilson's ex-boyfriend's death." A surge of vindication washed over me at his words. "It is true, every word of it," I affirmed, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and anticipation. The detective nodded slowly, a look of determination in his eyes. "All right then. Leave this with me. I'll get the ball rolling with that." He began to gather the documents, his expression one of focused resolve. As Carlos and I exited the police station, a powerful sense of anticipation thrummed through me. The wheels were in motion. Amber was finally going to face justice. For the first time in a long while, a flicker of hope ignited within me, mingled with a sense of empowerment. The idea that Amber's deceitful actions might finally catch up to her was both exhilarating and terrifying. 2 days later, my phone rang with Carlos's name flashing on the screen. I answered, my heart racing. "Turn on the news," Carlos instructed, his voice brimming with a note of triumph that sent a shiver down my spine. I immediately grabbed the remote and switched on the television. My breath caught as the anchor's face appeared on the screen, her expression grave. "Breaking news," the anchor announced, her tone somber. "Local woman Amber Wilson has been arrested in connection with the previously unsolved death of her ex-boyfriend, Mark Thompson. New evidence has come to light, prompting police to reopen the investigation." My eyes widened as the screen transitioned to live footage of Amber being escorted out of her and Jake's house in handcuffs. Her face was a tumultuous blend of shock, fury, and disbelief, while Jake trailed behind, his expression one of profound confusion and disorientation. The image of Amber, once so smug and untouchable, now reduced to a criminal in handcuffs, filled me with a fierce satisfaction that burned brightly in my chest. As the news segment continued, detailing the unfolding events and the nature of the new evidence, I felt a deep, resonant sense of justice beginning to take shape. Amber was finally getting what she deserved, and the path to rectifying the wrong she had inflicted was starting to clear. My heart swelled with a complex mix of emotions: relief, triumph, and a renewed sense of strength. This was far from over, but seeing Amber's facade of invincibility crumble, I allowed myself a moment of vindication. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The consequences of her actions were no longer a distant hope, but a stark reality. But the elation I felt from Amber's arrest was fleeting. As the news report continued, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The anchor detailed how Jake had been forced to dip into their savings to post Amber's bail and hire a lawyer. The financial strain was significant, casting a shadow over their marriage and adding to the strain of their already tumultuous situation. My initial triumph was clouded by a gnawing discomfort. I should have felt a pang of guilt, knowing that I had played a part in their hardship, but instead, a bitter satisfaction took root. They had orchestrated this suffering themselves with their cruelty and deceit, and now it seemed only fitting that they faced the consequences. In the weeks that followed, I observed from a distance as the drama continued to unfold. Amber's arrest had captured public attention, making headlines and becoming fodder for every gossip column. The court of public opinion was unforgiving, and speculation swirled around her involvement in her ex-boyfriend's death, as well as potential other dark secrets she might be hiding. The relentless media scrutiny was brutal, and Jake, who had once seemed so strong, now appeared worn down and haggard. His attempts to stand by Amber in public, putting on a brave face, did little to mask the toll the situation was taking on him. There was a part of me that ached to reach out, to offer some semblance of comfort or support, despite the turmoil between us. The sight of Jake's exhaustion and the visible cracks in his resolve tugged at my heartstrings. Yet, as much as I wanted to extend an olive branch, I found myself hardening my heart. The harsh words he had thrown at me, the way he had dismissed me and sided with Amber, lingered in my memory. He had made his choice, and now he had to face the reality of his actions. He had made his bed, and it was only right that he lay in it. The weeks wore on, and while the public's judgment of Amber remained fierce, Jake's struggle became increasingly evident. He seemed to be teetering on the edge, grappling with not only the financial burden but also the emotional toll of the situation. Despite the sympathy I felt for him, I remained resolute in my decision to stay away. The pain of being rejected and the sharpness of his betrayal were too fresh, too raw. As the court proceedings continued, Amber's arrogance seemed to wane, replaced by a stark reality that she could no longer ignore. The walls that once seemed impervious were now crumbling, and the consequences of her actions were catching up to her. Watching from the sidelines, I couldn't help but feel a complex blend of emotion, satisfaction, sorrow, and a reluctant understanding of the fragile nature of family and forgiveness. One crisp afternoon, as I was lugging groceries up the path to my door, I caught sight of a familiar figure slouched on my doorstep. It was Jake, his posture drooped in defeat, his eyes swollen and red. My instinct was to ignore him, to pretend I wasn't home and avoid another confrontation. Yet, despite my resolve, curiosity and the echoes of our past tugged at me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended as I approached, my arms weighed down by the heavy bags. Jake's gaze lifted, and I saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, his eyes reflecting a weariness I hadn't seen before. "I need your help," he said, his voice cracking under the strain of unspoken emotion. I raised an eyebrow. letting the irony of the situation sink in. Oh, now you need my help. Whatever happened to being done with me and my so-called schemes? The words cut deeper than I meant, and Jake flinched as though my words had physically struck him. I know, he said, his voice trembling. I said some terrible things, but this situation is beyond anything I could have imagined. Amber is in serious trouble, and the evidence against her is damning. A wave of unease washed over me. What exactly are you saying? Jake's voice broke into a desperate whisper. I'm saying I don't know what to do. The lawyer fees are draining us dry, and if Amber is convicted, I can't possibly manage to raise the kids on my own. I need your help, Mom, please. His plea was raw, filled with vulnerability, and for a moment I wavered. He looked so broken, so utterly defeated, that a part of me wanted to reach out and offer comfort. But then I remembered the betrayal, the heartache, and the harsh words he had thrown at me in the past. My resolve hardened. I took a deep breath, straightening my posture to meet his gaze with steely determination. You should have thought about this before you turned your back on me, I said, my voice like a shard of ice. I'm sorry, Jake, but I can't help you now. You made your choice, and you'll have to face the consequences of it. I brushed past him, his pleas and apologies falling on deaf ears. The pain of his past actions and the way he had abandoned me was still too fresh, too raw. As I entered my house, the weight of his desperation lingered like a shadow. I knew I had to be firm, to uphold my boundaries, despite the gnawing ache in my heart. Jake had chosen his path, and now he had to navigate the rough terrain he had created for himself. A few days after Jake's desperate visit, I was caught off guard by an unexpected call. Amber's mother was on the line, her voice strained and tight. Diane, I know we've had our differences, but I need to ask a favor, she said, her words heavy with unspoken emotions. My surprise must have been evident. What kind of favor? It's about the kids. With everything going on with Amber's case, Jake's struggling to keep up. He needs a break. I was hoping you could take the children for the weekend. I hesitated, conflicted. The thought of spending time with my grandchildren was both heartwarming and painful. It had been so long since I'd had them in my home, and the idea of reconnecting with them was tempting. Yet the notion of aiding Jake and Amber, who had treated me so poorly, was challenging to accept. Please, Diane, Amber's mother continued, her voice urgent. I know you love those kids. They need some stability right now, and they won't get it from Jake or Amber. Her words pierced through my defenses. Despite the animosity and hurt from the past, I couldn't ignore the fact that my grandchildren were innocent in this mess. They deserve stability and love, regardless of their parents' actions. My resolve weakened, and I sighed, conceding. All right, I said finally. I'll take them for the weekend, but I'm doing this for them, not for Jake or Amber. Thank you, Diane. I'll let Jake know to drop them off Friday evening. True to her word, Jake arrived on my doorstep that Friday, the children in tow. His appearance was worse than before, his face gaunt, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and stress. Mom, he greeted me, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I gave him a curt nod, my attention drawn to the kids. They stood there, their little faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. My granddaughter's face lit up with recognition, and she squealed, "Grandma," before racing forward and wrapping her small arms around my waist. The warmth of her embrace brought a lump to my throat, and I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. "Hello, sweetheart. I've missed you," I managed to say, my voice trembling. My grandson shuffled forward, his eyes wide but shy. I crouched down, extending my arms to him. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped into my embrace, and I felt a swell of love and sorrow. Jake handed over the children's bags, his gaze fleeting between me and the kids. "They've got their things," he said quietly. I guess that's it, I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. I'll take good care of them, Jake. You don't need to worry. He gave a terse nod, his eyes avoiding mine. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. As he drove away, I stood there, the weight of the past few days settling over me. With the children now in my care, my focus shifted. The weekend ahead promised moments of joy and healing, but also a chance to confront the complexities of my strained relationship with Jake and Amber. My grandson was more reserved, clinging to Jake's side with a hesitant gaze. I knelt, opening my arms in an attempt to comfort him. "Come here, buddy. It's okay." Slowly, he shuffled into my embrace, his small body trembling slightly. I wrapped him in a gentle hug, feeling my heart ache for both him and his sister. Jake cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to him. "I'll pick them up Sunday evening. If anything comes up, just give me a call." I looked at him, my expression cool but my voice steady. "We'll be fine. Enjoy your weekend." Jake nodded, his gaze fleeting. With one last glance at the kids, he turned and left, driving away with the weight of his troubles. I took a deep breath, forcing a cheerful smile for the children. Who wants pizza for dinner? Their faces brightened, and we quickly shifted to the simple joy of preparing a meal together. The weekend unfolded in a blur of laughter, games, and bedtime stories. For a few precious hours, I managed to forget the bitter conflict with Jake and Amber, focusing instead on the joy of being with my grandchildren. Time seemed to pass too quickly. Before I knew it, Sunday evening arrived, and Jake was back to pick up the kids. He greeted me with a guarded expression as they gathered their things, his demeanor tense yet softer than before. "Grandma, can we come stay with you again soon? We had so much fun," my granddaughter said, her eyes wide with hope. I smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Of course, honey, anytime." Jake observed the interaction with a mixture of relief and sadness. He opened his mouth to speak but seemed to reconsider, opting for a simple nod instead. He took the kids by the hand, guiding them toward the door. I watched them leave, a pang of sadness hitting me as the door closed behind them. As the house fell quiet once more, I felt a complex wave of emotions: grief, relief, and a lingering sadness. The weekend with my grandchildren had been a brief escape from the pain and betrayal, a reminder of what truly mattered. But the outside world, with all its unresolved issues and ongoing conflicts, was still waiting. The battle with Amber was far from over, and the road ahead remained fraught with challenges. As we wrap up today's video, I hope you've gained some valuable insights into the complexities of family dynamics and the journey of seeking justice. From the heart-wrenching betrayal and personal growth to the unexpected twists and turns, it's clear that navigating these challenges requires strength and resilience. I'd love to hear from you about what you've learned from today's story. What's one lesson or insight you'll take away and apply in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video impactful, don't forget to leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Your support helps us continue to create and share stories that matter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.